It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even a conversation. It was a notification on her iPad. Reminder, Wax Plus Room 614, 7 p.m. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. The iPad was on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower, and the screen lit up when I walked by. I glanced. That's it. That was all it took for everything to fall apart. Wax? Room 614? We don't stay in hotels. Not anymore. Not since the budget talks. Not since she told me we needed to be smarter about spending. Not since she casually said she wasn't in the mood much these days, and that I should focus on other ways to feel close. But apparently, she had no problem feeling close, in hotels, after salon visits. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't rage or accuse or even cry. No drama. Just data. Instead, I pulled out the spreadsheet I used to track our shared expenses. It's something I started doing years ago, back when I thought being responsible would earn me respect. I looked at every charge I covered. Her hair, her lashes, her Uber rides, her boutique apps, her weekly coffee therapy sessions, which, now that I think about it, never included a therapist. It all made me feel like a fool wearing a crown made of receipts. Still, I said nothing. Until the next night. She came home late, smelling like a department store and humming to herself like she was the star of a commercial. She walked right past me and mumbled something about being tired. I waited, and then I asked, "Are we ever going to be intimate again? Or is that just off the table forever?" She didn't even turn around. "I don't want to be intimate with you," she said flatly, tossing her coat on the couch. "It's not a big deal. I just don't feel like it anymore." And just like that, something inside me didn't break, it powered down. Like someone hit the emergency switch and every light in my chest flickered off. No yelling. No insults. No begging. Just a quiet decision. The next morning, I shut off every financial faucet she used. Credit card. Frozen. Streaming accounts. Logged out. Auto pay for her Pilates. Canceled. Even the pet food delivery she insisted on for our allergy-prone cat. Done. By noon, she was calling me from the vet's office. Why did my card decline? There's a line of people behind me. I said calmly, I'm no longer in the mood to sponsor someone who sees me as a backup plan. She hung up. And that's when it started. Not tears. Not apologies. But what came next? The next morning started like any other, but by the time the sun hit the living room window, I had already seen the first sign that she wasn't going to let this slide. She stormed into the kitchen wearing a robe that cost more than my winter coat and slammed her phone down so hard it echoed through the house. Her mascara was flawless, but her composure? Completely cracked. You froze the card, she hissed, like I just canceled her blood supply. I didn't answer immediately. I wanted to sip my coffee first. I wanted to give her that unbearable silence, the kind that says, yes, I did, and I'm not sorry. When I finally spoke, I kept my voice steady. I figured since you're no longer in the mood to be my wife, I should stop financing your girlfriend lifestyle. She stared at me, stunned. Not because she didn't know what I meant, but because I had said it. Out loud. Without flinching. She always thought I'd be the quiet one. The pushover. The guy who'd sit there with his spreadsheet and rationalize why love doesn't feel like love anymore. You're being dramatic, she snapped. I'm being practical, I replied. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't prepared for this version of me. For years, I played the supportive husband. The one who picked up after her bad days. The one who swallowed his disappointment like aspirin every time she came home late smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. She knew I suspected things. But as long as I didn't say anything, she thought she was safe. Now, she wasn't. And that terrified her. She tried to pivot. We're married. You can't just pull the plug on everything without talking to me first. I smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. Oh, you mean like how you made decisions about our intimacy without talking to me first? That one hit hard. She recoiled a little and glanced down at her phone like it might buzz and rescue her from this conversation. It didn't. Then she said something I'll never forget. I knew you'd make it transactional eventually. You were always keeping score. That hurt. It did. Not because it was true, but because she was twisting things so expertly that she sounded like the victim. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just looked at her, the woman I once proposed to in a freezing park, who cried tears of joy and told me I made her feel safe. And now here we were, arguing over who killed the marriage first. She grabbed her bag and said, Fine. I'll figure it out. But you better believe this isn't over. And she walked out. I assumed that meant she needed time to cool off. Maybe to reflect. Maybe even to reach out with some basic human decency. I was wrong. That night, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Just 4 words. You ruined her life. Attached was a photo of her crying on someone else's couch. I recognized the couch. It belonged to a guy she once called a business contact. He had been at one of her wine nights. The guy who lingered too long in our kitchen once and laughed a little too hard at her jokes. Apparently, now he was her emotional support animal. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because the next morning, I opened a locked folder on my laptop I hadn't looked at in months. And what I found there changed everything, and proved I wasn't crazy after all. I hadn't planned to open that folder again. I honestly thought I'd delete it eventually, like a shameful diary entry from a weak phase. But when I saw her crying on that other guy's couch, when I read that smug little message telling me I'd ruined her life, I felt something bubble up in me that had been brewing for longer than I realized. A slow rage, cold and steady. Not the explosive kind you see in movies, but the kind that wakes you up at 4 a.m. with your heart pounding like a war drum. That folder was named something stupid, Project June. I made it months ago when my gut started whispering that something was off. Not yelling, whispering. Like when she said she was getting into personal growth books, but couldn't name a single one. Or when she started wearing perfume to brunch with Alyssa, who I later found out moved to Arizona last year. Or when she changed the password on our Netflix account, but swore it was an accident. Inside the folder were screenshots, invoices, notes, voice memos. I'd built a case out of suspicion, but never had the courage to really look at it. Not until now. I started scrolling through the screenshots, credit card transactions that didn't make sense. A boutique hotel in the middle of the week. A restaurant we never went to, where the bill had 2 entrees and 1 glass of wine. 1. Why would she eat alone and order 2 meals? Then came the photos. Not the explicit kind, just hauntingly casual ones. Her reflection in an elevator mirror. Her hand holding a wine glass, another hand, definitely not mine, across the table, half cropped out. One selfie where she looked absolutely radiant, captioned, "He doesn't know a thing," smirking-faced. It had been sent to someone named Duke. I didn't know a Duke. We didn't know a Duke. But apparently, she did. My breathing got shallow. I had to sit down. I opened a voice memo I barely remembered recording. It was from a night she came home laughing on the phone. I'd hit record just out of gut instinct. I never listened to it until now. Her voice was quiet, giddy. He asked if I feel guilty, and I was like, no, because he doesn't ask anymore. He just exists. He's like background noise. She laughed, and the guy she was talking to laughed too. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. Background noise. That's what I'd become to her. A hum in the house. The guy who paid for the Wi-Fi so she could message Duke while I was in the next room building her IKEA bookshelf. I stood up, hands shaking, and walked to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror and couldn't even recognize the man looking back. Puffy eyes, hair like a neglected hedge, shoulders slumped forward like I was apologizing for taking up space. That was the moment I decided this wouldn't be a quiet collapse. I wasn't going to disappear into the background like some unpaid extra in my own life. No, if she wanted to turn this into a game, fine, but she had no idea how well I could play when I stopped trying to win her back and started trying to win myself back. So I packed a bag. Not to leave her. Not yet. I had a different plan. I drove to my brother's place 2 towns over. He owed me a favor. The kind of favor that came with spare keys, silence, and no questions. Because I wasn't going to confront her with yelling. I was going to do something much more terrifying. I was going to vanish. Quietly. With precision. And take everything she took for granted with me. And just 2 days later, she came home to a house that felt like a ghost town. Only she didn't know yet. The biggest ghost was me. 2 days. That's all it took to disappear without leaving a mess. I didn't slam doors or leave a dramatic note on the fridge. I didn't even take all my things, just enough to move like a shadow through the spaces she used to ignore me in. I left behind the sneakers she always complained about. The shaving cream she never let me keep on the sink. The hoodie she used to steal when she wanted to feel cozy. Let her keep those. Let her look at them. The rest, I took. Quietly. Precisely. While she was busy crying on someone else's couch, I was shutting down every piece of comfort she took for granted. The bank accounts? Moved. The joint credit card? Canceled, with a pleasant little notification sent directly to her inbox. The utilities? Transferred under her name. Even the car she insisted we lease for her yoga classes, I arranged for it to be picked up at noon, just before she'd get home. The house? I left the keys in the bowl near the door. I didn't need them anymore. What I needed was clarity. And for the first time in a long time, I had it. When she finally walked through the front door, I wasn't there to see it. But I can imagine it. The silence. The way the lights didn't turn on because the power bill was no longer on autopay. The pantry, half empty. The Wi-Fi, gone. Her music playlist, disconnected from the family plan. And on the kitchen counter, right where she usually dropped her purse, I left a plain white envelope. Inside it was a printout. One of the photos from that cursed folder. The elevator mirror shot, the one where her lips were puckered and smug. I didn't write anything on it. No explanation. No threat. Just the truth. Staring her in the face. By the time her first panic call came in, I was sitting on my brother's porch sipping bad coffee from a chipped mug, staring at his backyard like it held all the answers to the questions I didn't want to ask myself. She called once. Twice. Then 10 times. Then the text started. Where are you? What's going on? Why did you do this? I didn't answer. I wasn't ready. But what broke me wasn't her rage. It was the message she sent around 2 a.m. Just tell me what you want. That right there, that sentence, told me everything I ever needed to know. After all those years, she didn't know. She didn't understand the damage. The crack she caused one cold comment at a time. The 1,000 tiny betrayals she brushed off like dust. She still thought this was about money. About some dramatic tantrum. No, this was about value. And somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing mine. The next morning, I finally picked up one of her calls. I didn't speak. I just let her voice fill the silence. Please, she said, sounding smaller than I'd ever heard her. Just talk to me. This is insane. You can't just ghost your own wife. I finally spoke, softly. You did it first. You just didn't leave the house when you did it. She fell silent. I let it hang in the air. Then I hung up. Later that day, I got a knock at the door. It wasn't her. It was someone who made everything worse. A man with the kind of expression that told me he wasn't here for small talk. He introduced himself as Duke. And suddenly, everything I thought I knew about this situation, it got darker. Much darker. The name Duke had lived in my mind like a cockroach ever since I saw it pop up in that smug little text, the one where she bragged that I didn't know a thing. At the time, I assumed he was just a fling, some smooth-talking idiot with a gym membership and a car I probably paid for indirectly. But when he knocked on my brother's front door, wearing a neatly pressed button-down and holding a manila folder like a lawyer, I realized I had wildly underestimated the man who'd been orbiting my marriage like a vulture. I didn't open the door right away. I just stood there behind the curtain, watching him through the glass. He didn't look angry. He looked professional, patient, like he expected me to answer. And that rattled me more than I care to admit. When I finally cracked the door open, I didn't bother pretending to be polite. What do you want? 5 minutes, he said calmly. And no, this isn't about her. Well, not exactly. That threw me off balance. I opened the door wider, cautiously. He stepped in without asking, like someone used to walking into uncomfortable rooms and controlling them. She told me you were gone, he said, placing the folder on the dining table. What she didn't mention was why. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to fill in blanks for someone who had been playing house with my wife behind my back. But then he opened the folder and slid it toward me. Inside? A stack of printed screenshots, emails, and a USB drive taped to the corner. Not mine. Not from my folder. Hers. What is this? I asked slowly, eyes narrowing. Evidence, he said, with a sigh that sounded more tired than smug. Let's just say your wife didn't tell me the full story when we started. Whatever this was. I thought she was separated. I thought you were the problem. But you weren't even in the room, and she was still lying. I didn't touch the folder. My hands stayed clenched by my sides. Why bring this to me? Because I walked away, he said. 2 days ago. I told her I was done being her escape plan. I had no idea she was living off you like a parasite while pretending to be the wounded party. And I guess I just felt like you deserved to see what she was saying behind your back. About both of us. That made me pause. He was the villain in my head. The faceless name. The reason my nights were cold and my trust was bleeding out. But now he was here, exposing her, handing me a truth I didn't even know I needed. I flipped through the pages. One email caught my eye. She had written it to a friend named Kelly. He's spineless. I keep pushing boundaries and he just sulks. But I don't want to leave him yet. I want the financial cushion. Once I've got my footing, I'll make my move. My stomach turned. Here's the kicker, Duke added quietly. She was planning to get pregnant. I froze. She said it would make everything easier, that you'd never walk away if there was a baby. She wanted to trap you with fatherhood before she left. The room spun. The silence rang in my ears like a bell. I barely remember asking Duke to leave. I think I just walked to the back porch and stared out at the lawn until the sun started to dip. My brother came out once, asked if I was okay. I lied. Because how do you say out loud that your entire marriage was a strategy? That your wife was building a prison out of love letters and birth control pills she'd secretly stopped taking? That night, I opened the USB drive and played the audio files. And the very first one made me drop the glass I was holding. It was her voice, breathy, giggling. I'm going to tell him we should try for a baby. He'll melt. He always does. Then I'll have leverage. I stood there barefoot on broken glass, thinking about every time she touched my face and told me I was her safe place. Every time she said, "You'd make such a good dad." I didn't cry. I planned. Because now I wasn't just walking away. I was going to make sure she never touched another dollar, another moment, or another man's sympathy on my dime again. She tried to play me like a background character in her story. That night, after I listened to the recordings and read every word in that folder, something in me changed for good. Not just the pain that had already sunk in and set up camp in my chest. This was something sharper, colder, and far more calculated. She wanted to use me like an ATM with a pulse. She wanted to lull me into fatherhood to chain me down and cushion her escape. She saw my loyalty as a tool, my silence as permission, and my kindness as weakness. Fine. Let her think that. But the version of me she remembered, the one who paid the bills, cleaned up her messes, and stared at the floor during every argument, that version was gone. What was left was something far more dangerous, a man with nothing to lose and a clear view of every wire she'd laid in the dark. And now, I was going to cut every one of them. I started with the bank. I scheduled a full audit of every joint asset we shared. Not just the main checking account. No, I dug deeper. Investment accounts. Savings bonds her parents had gifted us. A travel fund she didn't know I had in my name only. Even the damn frequent flyer miles. I changed the passwords, rerouted the notifications, locked every point of access I could find. I left nothing behind but empty dashboards and error messages. Then I reached out to her boss. Well, the man she claimed was her boss. I had to be discreet, but a few social engineering tricks and a fake consulting inquiry later, I found out she hadn't been employed there for over a year. The job she kept using as an excuse for her absence? Total fiction. She'd been using the office building's parking garage to meet up with Duke, and God knows how many others, like it was a stage for a show I wasn't invited to. I didn't even feel anger at that point. What I felt was strategy. I called our mortgage company and initiated the transfer of our home deed into my name alone, perfectly legal, thanks to the structure of our purchase agreement. She never bothered to understand paperwork, so she never noticed that I was the sole borrower on the refinance last year. All I had to do was make it official. Next came the social front. Quietly, carefully, I began crafting my message, not the message I would send to her, but to the people who mattered, our mutual friends, her family, the handful of acquaintances she leaned on for sympathy when things got dramatic. I wasn't going to rant or scream or accuse. I simply compiled a folder of undeniable evidence, emails, photos, audio files, and added a short message at the top. She told you I disappeared. I want you to see what she didn't tell you. I didn't send it. Not yet. But it was there. Locked and ready. Then came the final piece. Something I had held off on. Something I had feared even more than the betrayal. I want to get tested. For everything. It's humiliating to even admit that I needed to. But if you've ever stared into the abyss of, what if she brought home more than lies, you know the kind of panic that lives in your bones. Thankfully, everything came back clean. But the damage had already been done to my trust in everything, not just her, but myself. My judgment. My instincts. The entire framework of how I saw love. That's when the phone calls started again. More frantic this time. More desperate. She was unraveling. You need to come back. Please. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I never meant to hurt you. You're ruining my life. But the best one, the one that made me sit back and actually laugh, was this. I'm pregnant. No proof. No doctor's note. Just words, thrown like a grenade, hoping it would hit the same heart she once played like a piano. But the music was gone. The keys were broken. And I didn't believe a single thing she said anymore. So I called her bluff. I said, then send me the ultrasound. With a date. And a name of the clinic. I'll meet you there. Silence. A full day went by. Then another. And then she finally snapped. Not emotionally. Legally. She filed a police report claiming I had abandoned her and stolen shared assets. The woman who told me she didn't want to be intimate, who said she didn't feel anything for me, who planned to use a fake pregnancy to trap me, was now accusing me of theft for taking back what was mine all along. But I was ready. She had no idea that the moment I vanished, I started documenting everything. Receipts, logins, timestamp messages, bank transfers in compliance with state law. All of it. The officer who showed up at my brother's door looked like he expected to deal with another messy domestic case. He walked away looking like he'd just sat through a corporate presentation on how to destroy a liar using nothing but facts and calm. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Because people like her don't stop when they're cornered. They perform. And what she did next, it made every twisted thing that came before look like a rehearsal. The first sign that she was preparing something theatrical came in the form of a voicemail from a mutual friend, Sherry, of all people. We hadn't spoken in months. She always leaned toward drama, the type to cry during shampoo commercials and live for gossip that she could deliver like a sacred sermon. She sounded breathless on the recording, like she'd just watched a car crash and was trying to explain it with her mouth full of disbelief. Derek, I don't know what to say. She told us you hit her. She said you locked her out of her own accounts and left her without money for food, that she's been sleeping in her car. I didn't want to believe it, but she showed us bruises. I paused the message there. I didn't need to hear the rest. Not yet, because I was too busy trying not to let the walls close in. Bruises? I hadn't even seen her since I walked out. The last time we were in the same room, she was tossing a passive-aggressive one-liner over her shoulder on the way to a fake yoga class. I hadn't raised my voice, let alone a hand. I had been strategic, quiet, careful, but that's the part she couldn't stand. She wanted a villain, someone to point at while she cried on cue. And if I didn't give her one, she'd create one. So I braced myself. And just as I feared, the storm rolled in fast. I started getting messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old coworkers, distant cousins, even her Aunt Lydia from Oregon, who I'm pretty sure thought I was a chiropractor, not an IT consultant. All of them suddenly concerned or checking in, or, worse, hoping the truth would come out. She was flipping the script, and she was good at it. Photos began circulating in private group chats. A bruise on her arm, a crying selfie taken from inside a car, a screenshot of a Google search for domestic abuse hotline. It was a media kit for a victim story she was writing in real time, except the abuse never happened. The only thing I ever damaged in our marriage was my own dignity, day after day, while she quietly burned every bridge behind my back. But the hardest part wasn't the lies. It was realizing how eager people were to believe them. Because no one wants to hear that a well-dressed, pretty woman is a manipulator. No one wants to believe that the man quietly folding laundry and covering rent might be the one getting used. And certainly no one wants to admit that the person crying on camera might be performing. Still, I didn't panic. I didn't scream into the void or write some angry, desperate post defending myself. I went to my attorney. Yes, I'd hired one already. I'd known something like this was coming the moment I cut the cord and watched her spiral. He was a quiet man named Ellis, the type who wore wrinkled suits but could slice through a lie with surgical precision. I showed him the messages, the photos, the voicemail, the folder Duke had given me. Ellis didn't flinch. She's trying to provoke you, he said. She's building a case she knows won't stand in court, but it will gain her sympathy. People like her know public opinion is often more powerful than legal facts. Don't respond. Don't post. Let her build her castle out of sand. We'll wait for the tide. So that's what I did. But inside, I was cracking. Not because I was afraid of the fallout, but because I was watching the woman I once kissed in the rain weaponize the truth like a blade. And then came the tipping point. A fake GoFundMe. She titled it, "Starting Over After Domestic Abuse, Help Me Rebuild." In less than 24 hours, she raised over $6,000. Complete strangers were pouring money into her hands while she played the role of a broken woman abandoned by a heartless man. I stared at that fundraiser page for hours. The comments underneath it were full of sympathy, love, and rage at me. One woman wrote, "I hope he rots in jail. No woman deserves this." And it hit me then, not just the depth of her manipulation, but the scope. She wasn't just lying to the people around us anymore. She was lying to the world. She was cashing in on my silence. But I wasn't going to be silent much longer. And I wasn't going to play defense anymore either. Because what she didn't know was that I wasn't just building a case. I had already finished it. And soon, the only person who'd be begging for sympathy would be her. It happened quietly. No dramatic confrontations. No viral posts. No screaming matches in a courthouse parking lot. Just a quiet Tuesday morning in a small courtroom, where she sat with crossed arms and fake tears, waiting to paint herself as the victim for a judge who had heard it all before. But this time, the story she tried to sell fell apart before it could take root. My attorney, Ellis, didn't raise his voice once. He didn't need to. Everything we'd gathered, screenshots, audio, timestamps, the fake GoFundMe, even Duke's sworn affidavit, was presented in a clean, chronological order. Her bruises? Forensically inconsistent. Her abandonment timeline? Proven false by call logs and bank records. Her pregnancy claim? Vanished from all mention when we demanded medical verification under oath. And the GoFundMe? Shut down. Investigated. Funds frozen. Her voice cracked when she realized what was happening. Her eyes darted, desperately searching for a corner to hide in. But there was nowhere left. She had built her story like a house of mirrors, one reflection after another, distorted just enough to look real. But mirrors shatter easily. The judge didn't say much. Just a simple, decisive ruling. No spousal support. Sole ownership of the house awarded to me. All joint accounts to be split based on traceable contribution. A strongly worded warning that any further false claims would result in criminal charges. And just like that, the spell was broken. She stood in the hallway outside the courtroom afterward, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. She didn't speak to me. She didn't even make eye contact. Maybe she thought I'd gloat, or spit something bitter on the way out. But I didn't. I just walked past her. Not with pride. Not with smugness. With peace. Because I was done being the guy in the background. Done living like a silent provider while someone else performed on a stage of lies. I drove home with the windows down, the wind on my face, and for the first time in years, no weight in my chest. The house was quiet when I returned, but it wasn't empty. It was mine again. The air didn't feel heavy. The floor didn't creak like it was judging me. I made myself a real dinner. I poured a drink. I sat on the back porch and watched the sun dip below the fence line. And I smiled. Not because I won, but because I made it through without becoming her. Because I didn't let her twist me into the monster she needed to justify her betrayal. And somewhere out there, she was probably crafting a new version of the story. One where she was misunderstood. Where I was cruel. Where she was still the heroine of her own sad little screenplay. But it didn't matter anymore. Because the truth caught up with her. And I'm finally free.